6:30 a.m. Sterling Plaza. Elevator doors split open like a wound. Robert Mitchell froze. The woman stumbled in from the 15th floor, gasping. Her $1,000 suit hung loose on trembling shoulders. Sweat beaded her forehead despite the morning chill. She clawed at her throat, drowning in plain air. Robert's hand moved without thought, pulling out a white handkerchief embroidered with Marie. He extended it silently. She snatched it, pressed it against her face, inhaled deeply. The panic melted away like ice in summer. Her breathing steadied, their eyes locked in the mirrored doors. "Thank you," she whispered, but her voice cracked with secrets. Ground floor, ding. She returned the handkerchief with fingers that still trembled. That's when Robert saw them. Fresh cuts decorating her wrist like crimson jewelry, and a hospital bracelet she'd forgotten to hide. The elevator doors sealed shut behind her, leaving Robert with one burning question that would haunt him for days. Robert stared at the empty elevator shaft long after the cables stopped humming. His cleaning cart sat abandoned, industrial mop dripping chlorine water onto marble floors that cost more than his yearly salary. 18 months had crawled by since Marie's funeral, but the handkerchief still carried her ghost. Chanel No. 5 mixed with hospital antiseptic, and the phantom scent of hope that died on operating tables. He'd carried it every day since the accident, this white square of cotton that represented everything he'd lost and couldn't replace. Marie had clutched it during that final ambulance ride, her fingers wrapped around the fabric like it could anchor her to life itself. Now Robert lived for Lucy, his 7-year-old hurricane, who asked fewer questions about Mommy but still cried in her sleep. Every morning brought the same ritual: braiding Lucy's hair wrong, packing lunches with too many cookies because he couldn't remember Marie's perfect portions, dropping his daughter at Riverside Elementary before racing downtown to Sterling Plaza. $32,000 a year kept their 2-bedroom apartment and Lucy's health insurance. Nothing more, nothing less. Just enough to survive in a world that felt too big for 2 people who'd once been 3. The mysterious woman haunted his thoughts through 9 floors of bathrooms and endless corridors of corporate success. Her panic had looked familiar, the same desperate gasping he'd watched Marie struggle with during those final weeks. But this woman's terror was different, sharper, like she was running from something that lived inside her own skin. Robert pushed his cart towards the lobby, wondering if broken people could recognize each other across elevator walls and unspoken tragedies. He didn't have to wait long for his answer. Next morning, she was there. Perched on the stone bench in Sterling Plaza's cathedral-sized lobby like a bird with clipped wings, expensive coffee trembling in manicured hands. Designer suit, department store jewelry, but her shoes told a different story. Canvas sneakers worn thin at the heels. The kind you wore when walking was more about escape than destination. Her employee badge hung backward, name obscured, just another corporate ghost in a building full of them. "I wanted to thank you." She stood too quickly, nearly painting the marble with Colombian dark roast. "Yesterday morning, in the elevator, you saved my life." Her voice carried strength now, but Robert could see fault lines beneath the surface. Dark circles shadowed green eyes that darted toward exit signs like escape routes. Fingernails bitten to the quick spoke of anxiety that lived in her bones. Everything about Amanda Foster, he learned her name like a secret, screamed of someone drowning in plain sight. Robert nodded because words felt dangerous around women who belonged in boardrooms, instead of chatting with janitors at dawn. "Are you okay?" The question escaped before he could stop it, hanging in the air between them like an accusation. Of course she wasn't okay. People who were okay didn't hyperventilate in elevators, or wear hospital bracelets like hidden shame, or cut patterns into their wrists like road maps to nowhere. "I will be," Amanda lied with practiced ease, and they both pretended to believe it. She extended her hand like a peace offering. "Amanda Foster, I work upstairs somewhere. Research department. Boring statistical analysis. Nothing exciting." The lie rolled off her tongue smooth as silk, but Robert had spent 18 months learning to read grief in strangers' faces. Amanda Foster was drowning in secrets deeper than his own. 2 weeks dissolved into routine with the inevitability of sunrise. Amanda materialized in the lobby each morning with 2 coffee cups. Black for Robert, because somehow she knew without asking, cream and sugar for herself, like she was sweetening something bitter in her soul. They'd claim the stone bench for 10 precious minutes before Sterling Plaza filled with important people discussing important things that didn't include janitors or broken researchers. Amanda never explained how she knew Robert's coffee preferences, or why she arrived at exactly 6:15 every morning, or what research required her to carry medical journals in a building full of financial consultants. Amanda's brilliance revealed itself in stolen moments between sunrise and rush hour. She fixed Robert's vacuum cleaner with nothing but intuition and a bent paper clip, her fingers moving with surgical precision around electrical components. When Robert worried about Lucy's parent-teacher conference, Amanda offered insights about child psychology that seemed impossibly sophisticated for someone who filed statistical reports. Her homemade cookies appeared one Tuesday morning, snickerdoodles that tasted exactly like Marie's recipe, though Robert never mentioned the coincidence. "How do you know so much about kids?" Robert asked after Amanda spent 20 minutes analyzing Lucy's crayon drawing with the intensity of an art curator. She'd never met his daughter, but she spoke about children with the reverence of someone who understood their fragile mathematics. Amanda's smile flickered like candlelight in wind. "YouTube," she said quickly. "Amazing what you can learn online these days." But her deflection felt rehearsed, another smooth lie in a growing collection. Robert catalogued Amanda's mysteries like evidence in a case he couldn't solve. The way she flinched when ambulances screamed past Sterling Plaza's windows, how her phone buzzed constantly with calls she never answered, her face tightening with each ignored ring. The medical journals weren't research materials. They were surgical publications, pediatric neurology texts, journals that belonged in hospitals instead of corporate filing cabinets. Amanda Foster was hiding something larger than a boring day job, and Robert found himself caring more than wisdom advised. For the first time since Marie's funeral, Robert looked forward to something beyond Lucy's bedtime stories and grocery shopping alone. Amanda made him remember what adult conversation felt like, what it meant to share thoughts more complex than homework assignments and electricity bills. She made him laugh, actually laugh, at her dry observations about Sterling Plaza's corporate theater. But guilt followed every moment of happiness like a shadow with teeth. Marie had been dead less than 2 years. Was enjoying Amanda's company a betrayal of his wife's memory? The handkerchief stayed in Robert's pocket, but he never offered it again. Amanda seemed stronger now, more stable, like their morning conversations were medicine for whatever poison lived in her bloodstream. Her panic attacks disappeared, replaced by something that looked almost like peace. Robert told himself he was helping her heal, but truth whispered that she was saving him too. For 18 months, his world had shrunk to Lucy's needs and his own exhaustion. Amanda made it expand again. Thursday morning arrived without Amanda's familiar silhouette in the lobby. Robert scrubbed floors with unnecessary violence, telling himself people changed routines constantly. Friday passed in similar Amanda-less silence. By Monday, Robert was checking every floor as he cleaned, hoping to glimpse her through conference room windows or catch her shadow in corporate hallways. Sterling Plaza felt hollow without her presence, like someone had drained all the color from his mornings. Wednesday shattered Robert's careful world with a phone call that stopped his heart. Lucy's teacher, calm but urgent, bicycle accident, head injury, ambulance, hospital, come now. Robert abandoned his cleaning cart on the 20th floor and ran for the stairs. taking them 3 at a time while his universe collapsed into a single prayer. Not Lucy. Please, not Lucy. He'd survived losing Marie, but losing his daughter would end him completely. His phone rang again in the parking garage. Amanda's voice, breathless and worried in ways that made no sense. "Robert, I heard about Lucy. I'm at Children's Memorial Hospital, room 207. She's awake and asking for you." Questions multiplied like cancer cells. How did Amanda know about the accident? How had she reached the hospital before him? Why was she there at all? But they could wait. Lucy needed her father. Room 207 buzzed with controlled medical chaos. Lucy sat propped against white pillows, a bandage crowning her forehead like a badge of survival. She was crying but alert, beautiful and alive, and asking for her daddy with the desperation of someone who'd glimpsed the darkness beyond consciousness. Amanda stood beside the hospital bed, and for the first time since Robert had known her, she looked completely in her element. Her hands moved with professional certainty, checking Lucy's pupils with a penlight that appeared from nowhere. "Daddy!" Lucy reached for Robert with both arms, and he swept her into a hug that threatened to crack his ribs. Over his daughter's shoulder, he watched Amanda work with the medical team like she belonged there. She understood their terminology, anticipated their procedures, moved through hospital corridors with the confidence of someone who'd walked them 1,000 times before. This wasn't research. This was expertise. "Are you a doctor?" Lucy asked Amanda after the initial chaos settled into routine monitoring. The question detonated in the room's antiseptic air. Amanda's professional composure cracked like ice under pressure, revealing something raw and wounded beneath. "I used to be," she said quietly, her fingers gentle against Lucy's bandaged forehead. "A long time ago. But it wasn't a long time ago," Robert realized with growing certainty. Amanda's medical knowledge was too current, too precise. The nurses deferred to her judgment with the respect reserved for colleagues, not former practitioners. When she spoke about surgical procedures, her voice carried the authority of recent experience. Amanda Foster wasn't a failed researcher hiding from corporate boredom. She was a doctor running from something much more dangerous than statistics. After Lucy fell asleep under the hospital's artificial twilight, Robert cornered Amanda in the corridor that smelled like disinfectant and broken dreams. His heart hammered against his ribs with gratitude and confusion, and something that felt uncomfortably like betrayal. "Who are you?" he asked, his voice carrying more anger than he intended. "Really?" Amanda leaned against the wall like she needed its support to remain upright. Suddenly she looked every one of her 34 years, plus the weight of whatever secrets she'd been carrying. Her professional mask dissolved, leaving behind a woman who looked as shattered as Robert felt most days. "Dr. Amanda Foster," she said. "Pediatric surgeon. Former pediatric surgeon. I resigned 2 years ago." The timeline hit Robert like a physical blow. 2 years ago meant 6 months before Marie's death. Amanda had been a pediatric surgeon, a children's doctor, and she'd hidden it from him for weeks of morning conversations and growing trust. "Why?" The question came out strangled, though part of him already feared the answer. "I lost a patient." Amanda's voice barely rose above a whisper. 5-year-old boy named Ryan. Brain tumor, complex surgery. I did everything right, Robert. Everything by the book, everything my training taught me. But sometimes everything right isn't enough. Tears carved tracks down her cheeks, and Robert had never seen anyone look more completely destroyed. His father was a single dad, just like you. Worked 2 jobs to pay for medical bills, believed in me completely. I had to tell him his son was gone. That wasn't your fault, Robert said automatically. But Amanda shook her head with the vehemence of someone who'd had this argument with herself 1,000 times. "I couldn't handle it anymore," she continued. "Couldn't sleep, couldn't eat, Couldn't pick up a scalpel without seeing Ryan's face, so I quit. Took a research position filing papers for 1/10 of my old salary. Started having panic attacks every morning before work. Understanding crashed over Robert like cold water. That's what I saw in the elevator. You trying to work up courage to face another day. Amanda nodded, her composure completely gone now. I came to Sterling Plaza because I knew you worked there. After Marie's accident made the news. After I saw the photo of you carrying Lucy out of the funeral home. I wanted to understand how single parents survive losing everything. I thought if I could learn from you, maybe I could figure out how to keep living. The revelation stole Robert's breath. Amanda hadn't found him by accident. She'd sought him out, studied him, learned his routines and his coffee preferences and his daughter's schedule. "You've been watching us," he said, and Amanda flinched like he'd struck her. "I wanted to understand strength," she said desperately. "You lost Marie, but you kept going for Lucy. You never gave up, never stopped fighting. I lost one patient and fell apart completely. I needed to learn how to be brave like you." Before Robert could process this confession fully, Amanda was walking away, her heels clicking against linoleum like a countdown timer. She paused at the elevator, the same model that had started everything, and looked back with eyes full of regret. "Take care of Lucy," she said. "She's lucky to have you." The doors closed and Robert was alone again, surrounded by the hospital smell that would forever remind him of losing Marie and almost losing Lucy, and watching Amanda disappear into her own private darkness. The next few days crawled by in a haze of medical appointments and insurance paperwork. Lucy recovered with the resilience of childhood, but she kept asking about Dr. Amanda and when she was coming back to check on her stitches. Robert had no answers. Amanda had vanished from Sterling Plaza as completely as she'd appeared, her 15th floor desk cleared out overnight like she'd never existed. Robert threw himself into work with the desperation of a man trying to outrun his own thoughts. He scrubbed floors until his knuckles bled, reorganized supply closets that were already perfectly arranged, worked overtime shifts that paid time and a half but cost him hours with Lucy. His co-workers noticed the change but didn't comment, except for Karen Williams, who made snide remarks about getting above his station and thinking janitors could date doctors. Robert ignored her poisonous observations because the truth was worse than gossip. The worst part wasn't losing Amanda. He'd known she was temporary from the beginning, too bright and complicated for his simple world. The worst part was discovering that their entire relationship had been built on her research into his tragedy. Every morning conversation, every shared coffee, every moment he'd thought was genuine connection had been Amanda studying him like a specimen under a microscope. She'd never wanted to know Robert Mitchell the person. She'd wanted to understand Robert Mitchell the survivor. But Lucy wasn't handling Amanda's disappearance with adult cynicism. She'd grown attached to the idea of having a doctor in their family, someone who could fix scraped knees and explain why the sky was blue and make everything better with professional competence. "When is Dr. Amanda coming back?" became Lucy's daily question, and Robert's standard answer, "I don't know, sweetheart," satisfied her less each time. 3 weeks passed before Amanda called. Robert was cleaning executive bathrooms on the 19th floor when his phone buzzed with an unknown number. Amanda's voice, shaky and small and scared in ways that made his chest tighten despite everything. "Robert, I'm sorry to bother you, but I didn't know who else to call. I'm having my first surgery on Monday. My first surgery in 2 years. I'm terrified." Robert gripped the phone so hard his knuckles went white. After weeks of silence, after learning about her deception, after watching her walk away without explanation, she was calling him for emotional support. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because you're the only person who knows the truth about me," Amanda said, her voice cracking like thin ice. "The only person who's seen me completely broken and still treated me like I was worth something. I know I have no right to ask after what I did, but could you maybe wish me luck? I know it's pathetic, but It's not pathetic," Robert interrupted, surprising himself with the certainty in his voice. Despite the lies and the secrets and the way she'd studied his grief like a research project, he couldn't bear to hear her sound so completely shattered. "Of course I wish you luck. You're going to save someone's life on Monday. What if I don't?" Amanda's voice was barely audible. "What if I freeze up in there? What if I make another mistake? What if I kill another child because I'm too broken to do my job?" "Then you'll try again," Robert said, though he wasn't sure he believed his own words. Trying again meant risking your heart after it had already been pulverized. Trying again meant opening yourself to loss and failure and the kind of pain that never fully healed. That's what people do when they're not ready to give up. They try again. Monday morning arrived with sirens and chaos and another phone call that stopped Robert's world. Lucy had been running a fever all weekend, but Monday brought seizures and unconsciousness and paramedics who spoke in urgent code about brain swelling and emergency procedures. This time, Robert knew exactly which hospital they were heading to, Children's Memorial, where Dr. Amanda Foster was scheduled to perform her first surgery in 2 years. The emergency room exploded with controlled panic the moment Lucy's gurney rolled through automatic doors. She looked impossibly small against white sheets, her face pale and still in ways that reminded Robert too much of Marie's final days. The attending physician, Dr. Harrison Mitchell, according to his name tag, barked orders in rapid-fire medical terminology about pressure buildup and surgical intervention and the need for immediate action. "We need our best pediatric neurosurgeon," Dr. Mitchell told his team. "Get Dr. Foster down here now." Robert's heart stopped beating for several crucial seconds. Amanda appeared in the emergency room doorway, wearing scrubs and a surgical cap, her hands already scrubbed and steady in ways he'd never seen before. For a moment their eyes met across the chaos of medical equipment and urgent voices. Amanda's face went pale when she recognized Lucy on the table, but her voice remained professional and calm. "What do we have?" she asked Dr. Mitchell, though her gaze never left Lucy's unconscious form. Robert watched her transform from the broken woman who'd called him 3 days ago into Dr. Amanda Foster, pediatric surgeon, the person she'd been before Ryan's death convinced her she was a failure. 7-year-old female presenting with high fever and seizures. CT shows significant brain swelling. We need to relieve the pressure immediately, or we'll lose her. Dr. Mitchell's words carried the weight of life and death decisions made in seconds. No room for hesitation or self-doubt or the luxury of fear. Amanda's hands moved with practiced efficiency, checking Lucy's pupils and reflexes with instruments that appeared from nowhere. "Prep 3, she said with the authority of someone who'd done this hundreds of times before. "I'll scrub in immediately." She looked at Robert, and for a heartbeat her professional mask slipped. "I'll take care of her," she said quietly. "I promise." Robert wanted to say something. "Thank you," or "I trust you," or "Please don't let me lose her too," but words seemed inadequate for the moment when his daughter's life hung in the balance. He could only nod as the medical team wheeled Lucy toward surgery, leaving him alone in the waiting room with nothing but hope and terror for company. 6 hours crawled by like geological ages. Robert paced the surgical waiting room until he'd memorized every magazine cover and coffee stain on uncomfortable plastic chairs. Other families came and went, their own dramas playing out in hushed conversations and whispered prayers. Robert sat alone with his thoughts and his fears and the growing realization that he might lose Lucy the same way he'd lost Marie. Suddenly, violently, in a hospital that smelled like antiseptic and broken dreams, Amanda finally emerged from the operating room, looking exhausted but triumphant, still wearing scrubs and a surgical cap that had witnessed 6 hours of life-saving precision. She found Robert in the waiting room where he'd carved paths in the linoleum with his pacing. "She's okay," Amanda said before Robert could form the question that had been burning in his throat. "The surgery went perfectly. She'll make a complete recovery." Robert's knees buckled with relief so profound it felt like drowning in reverse. 6 hours of imagining the worst possible outcomes, of reliving Marie's final decline, of preparing himself to bury his daughter beside his wife. "Thank you," he managed, though the words felt pathetically inadequate for what Amanda had just accomplished. "There's something you need to know," Amanda said, settling into the plastic chair beside him, with the careful movements of someone who'd been on her feet for 6 straight hours. "The patient I lost 2 years ago. Ryan, he had exactly the same condition as Lucy, same age, same symptoms, same surgical procedure. I failed him, Robert. I failed his father. I couldn't save their family." Robert stared at her, pieces of a larger puzzle finally clicking into place. "That's why you quit." It wasn't a question because the answer was written in every line of exhaustion on Amanda's face. "That's why I quit," she confirmed. "But today, when I saw Lucy on that operating table, I remembered why I became a doctor in the first place. Not because I wanted to be perfect, or because I needed to save everyone. Because sometimes we can help. Sometimes we can make the difference between a family staying together and falling apart." Dr. Mitchell appeared in the waiting room doorway, still wearing his own surgical scrubs, and looking at Amanda with something approaching awe. "Amanda, that was exceptional work in there. The finest surgery I've witnessed in my 30-year career. We need you back full-time. The children's ward has been incomplete without you." Amanda looked at Robert, then back at Dr. Mitchell, weighing decisions that would reshape her entire future. "I'll consider it," she said carefully. "But right now, I just want to check on my patient." Lucy woke up 3 hours later in the pediatric recovery ward, groggy from anesthesia but beautifully, miraculously alive. Her first word was "Daddy," spoken in a voice hoarse from intubation, but her second word was Dr. Amanda. Robert had never heard anything more perfect in his entire life. Amanda sat beside Lucy's hospital bed, monitoring her vital signs with the gentle expertise that Robert now recognized as her true nature. "Dr. Amanda?" Lucy said sleepily, her 7-year-old logic cutting through adult complications with surgical precision. "Are you going to be my new mommy?" The question hung in the room's recycled air like a prayer waiting for an answer. Amanda's eyes filled with tears, but she smiled with genuine warmth for the first time since Robert had known her. "I don't know, sweetheart," she said with the honesty that children deserved. "That's something your daddy and I would need to figure out together." Robert looked at his daughter, alive and safe because of the woman he'd fallen in love with, somewhere between morning coffee and hospital corridors. Amanda had lied about her identity, but she'd never lied about her heart. She'd saved Lucy's life today, but more importantly, she'd saved Robert's life weeks ago in a Sterling Plaza elevator, one morning conversation at a time. "Amanda," Robert said quietly, using her first name instead of her title for the first time, "would you like to have dinner with us tomorrow night? Lucy makes excellent grilled cheese sandwiches, and I promise not to burn them." Amanda's smile was brighter than hospital fluorescent lights, and more beautiful than sunrise over Sterling Plaza's marble lobby. "I'd love that," she said, "but only if you call me Amanda from now on. Just Amanda. I'm tired of hiding behind titles and professional distance." 10 months later, Robert still arrived at Sterling Plaza before dawn, but the job felt transformed. Amanda met him in the lobby most mornings, not because she was having panic attacks or researching his survival mechanisms, but because she wanted to share coffee and conversation before their separate days began. She worked 3 days a week at Children's Memorial now, splitting her time between surgery and the family she'd accidentally discovered while running from her own failures. Lucy called her Dr. Amanda when she wanted to sound grown up, and Mandy when she needed pancakes for breakfast or help with math homework that made Robert's head spin. They'd never officially moved in together, never made grand declarations about marriage or forever, or the kind of promises that felt too fragile for people who'd learned how quickly everything could disappear. Instead, they'd built something quieter and more durable, a life that accommodated Lucy's school schedule and Amanda's surgical rotation, and Robert's determination to provide stability for his complicated family. Amanda kept her own apartment, but she spent most evenings on Robert's couch, helping Lucy with art projects and teaching her to braid friendship bracelets with the patience of someone who understood that childhood was precious and temporary. Marie's handkerchief sat in a small frame on Amanda's desk at the hospital now, not as a shrine to the past, but as a reminder of the moment when two broken people found each other and decided to try breathing again. Lucy had learned to embroider during her recovery, and she'd made Amanda a new handkerchief with her own uneven stitches, for helping people breathe better, spelled out in purple thread that wandered across white cotton like a child's drawing of hope. On Tuesday afternoons, when Amanda didn't have surgery and Lucy was at piano lessons, they returned to the Sterling Plaza lobby where everything had started. Robert would drink his black coffee, while Amanda loaded hers with cream and sugar, like she was sweetening something that had once been bitter. They'd watch important people in important suits rush past, discussing important mergers and acquisitions and market fluctuations, but they knew they'd found something more valuable than corporate success. They had each other. They had Lucy. They had the quiet certainty that some love stories don't end with wedding bells and fairy tale promises. Some love stories end with Tuesday afternoon coffee and the sound of a 7-year-old practicing piano scales in the next room, and the knowledge that tomorrow would bring new challenges and new reasons to be grateful for the family they'd accidentally assembled from broken pieces. Amanda still had difficult days when the weight of surgical responsibility felt crushing, when she'd come home pale and shaking after losing a patient despite her best efforts. Robert still woke up some mornings missing Marie with an ache that threatened to consume him, guilt and grief tangled together like surgical sutures in his chest. But they'd learned that healing wasn't about forgetting the past or pretending pain didn't exist. Healing was about finding someone who understood your scars and chose to love you anyway. The elevator at Sterling Plaza still carried its daily cargo of ambition and anxiety, but sometimes when Robert was cleaning the upper floors and Amanda was heading to surgery, they'd ride together in comfortable silence. No words necessary, no explanations required. Just two people who'd discovered that the most profound connections begin with the simplest gestures. A handkerchief offered to a stranger who couldn't breathe, a cup of coffee shared at dawn, a promise to try again when trying felt impossible. In the reflection of those same mirrored doors where they'd first seen each other, they looked like what they'd become. A janitor and a doctor who'd found something more valuable than professional status or social expectations. They'd found home in each other's presence, peace in understanding that neither of them was perfect, and hope in the knowledge that tomorrow would bring new opportunities to save each other, one breath at a time. The elevator doors would open onto their separate worlds, Amanda to save children's lives, Robert to keep Sterling Plaza running smoothly, Lucy to learn fractions and friendship and all the complicated mathematics of growing up. But they'd always return to each other, to the quiet life they'd built from morning conversations and shared coffee, and the kind of love that doesn't announce itself with grand gestures, but proves itself through small daily acts of choosing to stay. And in the end, that was enough. More than enough. It was everything they'd never known they were looking for, delivered in a package that looked nothing like their original dreams, but felt exactly like home. The handkerchief had done its work, helping someone breathe when breathing felt impossible. Now it rested in its frame, a reminder that sometimes the most important Joe lives we save are our own, and sometimes the best families are the ones we find by accident, while we're busy being broken and brave and beautifully, imperfectly human.